And we're back with our first show after Rosh Hashanah, or the Jewish New Year, and bringing you a dramatic development. As on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, 6 high-security Palestinian prisoners were able to escape an Israeli maximum security prison, and authorities have still not been able to track them down. How they managed to escape and who the prisoners are in the following story.
Just as Israelis were celebrating the Jewish New Year, 6 Palestinian militants broke out of Gilboa prison on Monday, one of Israel's highest security prisons. In a daring escape, the fugitives dug a hole in their prison cell and tunneled underneath the prison, making use of passages in the building's construction and finally emerging from a small hole dug just outside the prison near a guard tower. This marks one of the biggest prison breaks in Israeli history in decades, as the fugitives were able to take advantage of a number of security failures, which are currently being investigated. All of the prisoners have been directly or indirectly involved with terrorist attacks against Israelis. One of the prisoners has been identified as Zakaria Zubeidi, a former commander of Fatah's Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, one of the key symbols in the Second Intifada against Israel. The other 5 are affiliated with the Islamic Jihad and include 2 brothers serving life sentences for carrying out terrorist attacks against Israel, as well as 2 other prisoners serving life sentences, Yaqub Mohammed Kadri and Ayham Naif Karamji. Now, as the manhunt for fugitives enters its 4th day, Israel's security services remain on high alert, with more questions than answers.
And joining us now with the latest updates on the escape is ILTV reporter Asaf Nissan. Asaf, so we've entered the 4th day of the manhunt. I mean, what efforts are being made or have been made so far?
So what we've seen, Lidar, so far, efforts been made tirelessly. Ever since the escape was known to the public, IDF, the Israel Security Forces, the police themselves, Border Patrol, everyone has been on the manhunt. They've been trying to find them ever since they escaped. Of course, some of them escaped to different locations, but from what we know so far, that there was no luck in tracking them specifically one by one and arresting them. They're still on the run, they're still on the lam, and we're not seeing anything coming down in the next few days.
I mean, they essentially don't really know where they are.
Well, they do know some of them because there were locations coming out. For example, there were reports that 2 of them escaped to Jordan, while there are another 2 out of the other 4 remaining. They're hiding in Manjil Shams. Specifically, one of them is known because it's Zakaria Zubeidi, who's actually hiding in Jenin. And then, of course, the 6th one is the last question unknown, where he is exactly.
So, I mean, these are all reports, though. I mean, they don't necessarily know specifically that they're in these places, but I do understand that they have essentially tried, or there are reports coming out that some of them have already fled the country. I mean, so can you confirm these reports, or is it still all sort of conjecture at this moment?
Again, these rumors, the reports are still unsubstantial because we haven't seen any official visuals or anything coming out yet from those escapees. But those 2 who escaped the country reportedly have escaped to Jordan. They're supposed to be already in the safe hands of their brethren now. So, again, this is too early to know because we are talking about preliminary reports, and this is all in the air. But time will tell. Now,
you mentioned Zakaria Zubeidi, right, the former commander of the Al-Aqsa Brigade. And there are reports that he's hiding in the Jenin camp and is being protected by his family. I mean, how should Israel respond to this if this were the case?
Israel is going to take a big risk going in there. I mean, on the one hand, it's obviously that Israel should go in, especially the fact we're talking about an arch-terrorist who's considered to be one of the main figures of the Second Intifada. But then again, Jenin has always been a hotbed and a very hot battleground for what could happen, be the potential next Intifada. So we still don't know how Israel could go in there quietly, and probably won't, because as we see reports from his family and members of the different factions that are going to protect him there. And a lot of support is coming out in the streets for Zubeidi and for everyone there who's escaped. Of course, the 6 themselves are getting a lot of support in, but Zakaria Zubeidi, since he is a Jenin resident and the family is there, we're probably going to see the most danger, probably a lot of strife and fights in Jenin itself, arresting him.
Potentially a very dangerous situation. Now, I want to also talk about other prisons, because we've heard reports coming out that following the escape, right, there were also uprisings in at least one other prison in the country. I mean, what happened there exactly? Can you tell us?
What happened there, it was Prison Ktsiot, a prison that's located to the south that also is populated with a lot of dangerous prisoners. A lot of them are from the PIJ. And due to the fact that they saw this successful prison break as a rise to attempt and as a way to finally stick it up to the man, as we could say, they took it on themselves to start rioting. And now, as we know, riots always lead to injuries, to property damage, and we've seen that six different cells were burned throughout these riots, and more than tens of prisoners were hurt during this attempt. And we also know that after this, up to now, over 300 prisoners in the PIJ were dispersed and were placed in different prisons in order to try to calm and quash these uprisings.
All right, Asaf Nissan, thanks for speaking with us, and I want you to stay right here because we're going to continue coverage of the prisoner escape. While the investigation is ongoing, preliminary reports indicate that the escape was preceded by a number of security blunders, from a guard who may have fallen asleep on duty to the prison's plans being available on the internet, and many more. So joining us now to discuss what led to the escape is retired Lieutenant General Orit Adato, former commissioner of the Israel Prison Service, and former head of the Women's Corps in the IDF, and a member of Forum Dvora for Women in Security and Foreign Affairs. Welcome. So I want to jump right in and ask the first question on everybody's mind. I mean, how were 6 prisoners able to escape from one of Israel's highest security prisons?
You know, the place that from it one prisoner can escape, 6 as well can escape, one after the other. And really, for the question, it is really a failure in a way of the intelligence and the operation in the same prison. Of course, this is the first thing to be said, has to be said. The prison is maximum security, yes. There is something regarding the design of the prison, but it doesn't give an answer for what has happened. Because to dig such a tunnel takes a lot of time. And someone should have seen it, or should have heard about it, or should have identified kind of what we call tension indicators. It doesn't have to be tension, but something that is going on there, inside prison and as well as outside prison.
I mean,
we have heard that they had an assistance outside. So the intelligence inside out and outside in were not aware of what is going on.
I mean, can you walk us through some of the security failings that did lead to this escape?
I think it has been done by many of the reporters and many of the former not commissioners, but commanding of prisons. That's not the main point. It happens, you know, an inmate, especially a terrorist, especially those who doesn't have anything to lose, because otherwise they will stay there until their last days. They have all the time, they have all the intention, they have a great will to try and find, you know, the weak point of the prison, and they will find, in a way, a weak point in the prison, and they will utilize the way that it is being dealt with, the agenda, the daily agenda, the way that the guards are doing their job. They are waiting, you know, there is a quotation in Arabic says, al-ajal min ash-shitan, meaning running or being in a hurry or trying to rush things belong to the devil. We have all the time in the world to try and to achieve our goal, to escape. And it's not only Israeli issue. You know, all around the world, prisoners are trying to escape and sometimes succeed, unfortunately.
Now, in your time as commissioner, I mean, was a scenario like this ever discussed? Was it something that was plausible? I mean, did you ever hold drills in the event of such an escape?
Every commissioner is holding drills in that kind or other kind of escapes. There were escapes. Even in my time, there was an escape. That's something not like this one, but in a different way. That's the way it is. When you close one way, they are looking for the other way. When you close 10 ways, they are looking for the 11th or the 99th way. That's their goal and role. And the prison service role is to prevent it from happening. So in 99%, they succeed. In 1%, they fail, and that percent leads to that situation, which is really embarrassing.
Now, I want to ask one final question. I mean, we're also seeing a lot of unrest in other prisons, burning of cells in one case and such. I mean, has the Israeli prison service, sort of lost its control, lost its deterrence? I mean,
No.
what needs to be done now to essentially restore the calm inside the prisons?
Yeah, first of all, it's obvious because after there is a crisis like this, an escape, there are steps that are being taken by the commissioner and by the staff, which is to divide them to different prisons, different wings, different cells. Of course, they don't accept it, willingly. So they try to make some riots. This is something that the prison service is very trained how to deal with. And you have seen they tried in several prisons and they didn't make it. The issue is that it's always being, said that there will be riots in prison and then it will be outside. And we try to make it calm because otherwise the outside will be spread out. Hey, guys, listen, Israel is a strong country. It's not the worst case scenario that ever happened here, from security reasons. I'm not minimizing the risk and not minimizing the responsibility, of course. But Israel is strong, the IDF is strong, it will do its job, the Shabak, the security organization, know what it has to do, and the prison service knows what it has to do, now especially, to look deep down to any problem, any weak point, and go through all of it. So they will not accept it willingly. That's life, and they will manage with it. I'm sure about it.
All right, retired Lieutenant General Orit Adato, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. The prisoner's escape and the ensuing manhunt are of great concern to Israeli security forces, not only within the walls of Israel's high-security prisons, but beyond. Officials have expressed concern that these events could spill over to spell a wider escalation in the West Bank and in Gaza as well. Here to discuss these possibilities is Itamar Marcus, founder and director of Palestinian Media Watch. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
So, first of all, what can you tell us about the reactions to the prisoner escape that we're seeing coming out of the West Bank and also out of Gaza?
Well, the most important reaction is that the Palestinian Authority is giving its complete support to the terrorists who escaped. They're justifying it. They're literally telling their people to offer aid. There were two editorials in the official Palestinian newspaper, which literally said, if you see them, give them food, give them transportation, do it quietly, don't talk about it. It makes a mockery of the whole concept of security cooperation that the Palestinian Authority has with Israel, when here you have the official newspaper literally telling everybody to help these people to escape. Another very significant response was from Fatah's spokesman, Osama Kawasma. And he said, of course, first of all, quote, Fatah's pride on behalf of our heroic prisoners. But then he said they have the full right to take their freedom by force because they are freedom fighters and prison is a place for criminals. Now, why is this so important and what is he saying? The Palestinian Authority ideology is that Palestinians have a right to kill Israelis at any time, in any place. It's only a function of tactic. And therefore, every single prisoner in jail is a freedom fighter. Every single prisoner should not be in prison. Literally, they say that killing Israelis is justified. They claim it's even justified by international law. And this is a message that the kids get when they're from the youngest children through adults. And that's what's being said here. These people had a right to escape because they shouldn't have been in jail in the first place, even though they murdered civilians, because murdering civilians is something Palestinians have a right to do.
Now, switching gears for a second, we've already seen protests in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem over the prisoner escapes, but so far they have been rather limited. I mean, should we expect to see this grow, or is it under control at the moment, do you think?
The Palestinian Authority leadership has called for violence a number of times in, I would say, the last year or two. They called for violence if we're going back to when Israel opened up the embassy in Jerusalem, and they didn't succeed in bringing out the people. There were a number of other times they called for violence and didn't succeed. And there were other times when they did succeed. The people don't trust their leadership anymore. So the fact that the Palestinian Authority leadership is calling for violence is not going to get the people out into the street. However, if they're arrested, I think we might see a few days of heightened violence, nothing major. If some of them are killed while they're being arrested, it could even get worse. There's no doubt. I'd say one more thing about what we've seen in the past when the Palestinians start violence. What usually turns it into transmissions from small violence to outrageous terror, which lasts for a while, is a successful terror attack. When the violence starts, if they succeed in killing Israelis, that's going to be a trigger for a lot of copycat terror, and let's hope that doesn't happen.
Itamar, speaking of terror and speaking of incitement in the West Bank, we're seeing a lot of reports in Jenin, pretty much ever since Zacharias Beatty took refuge there. They're saying that they're going to defend them no matter what, and we're expecting a lot of violence. And even the Jenin governor also stated that if Israel will go in, consequences will be dire. What are you seeing from that angle?
Well, there's no doubt that the Palestinian population, thanks to the Palestinian Authority, has a tremendous amount of weapons. You've got the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades there. You've got the Hamas in Jenin as well. You've got a lot of people with weapons. And if Israel finds out that that terrorists are in Jenin and decides to go in, it could be a real battle. Let's hope we can catch them before they go in. It definitely could be a proper little minor war for a couple of days.
All right, Itamar Malkus, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
You're very welcome. Bye.
And now for some good news, just in time for the new year. The Health Ministry announced on Wednesday evening that the reproduction rate, known as R, dropped to 9.5, under 1 for the first time in weeks. So, is the spread of the coronavirus under control? Does this mean Israel has beaten the fourth wave due to its third dose booster shots? Here to answer these questions and more is Professor Nadav Davidovich, Director of the School of Public Health at Ben-Gurion University. Welcome. So, first of all, what exactly does it mean when you say that R is under 1?
So it means that every person is now infecting less than one person, and if this will continue, of course, we're going to see the shrinking of the outbreak. We need to be careful not to celebrate yet, because we're waiting to see what is going to be the influence of opening schools and the Rosh Hashanah or the high holidays. But in general, I think this is a very good sign. We have now 2.7 million people vaccinated third dose. And maybe even more important, during the last month, we have more than 200,000, especially young people that got their first vaccine.
I mean, you touched upon a very important fact, which is the children have just gone back to school. Families just met for holiday meals. I mean, are we going to see now a rise due to all of this?
According to the different models, it might, raise the number of cases by about 5 to 10%. Altogether, if we're taking the fact that many people now are doing tests, including rapid tests and home tests, and the Green Pass now is much more enforced than used to be up until a few weeks ago, I think there'll be maybe some rise. Of course, we need to be very humble now and wait and see how it's going to develop. But I think these are indeed good news for the new year. I think we can be much better in enforcement, and also remember that things like the Panjoya, the students' events, or now the people moving to Uman, to Ukraine, all these are challenges that we must need to take care of them, both by vaccinations, testing, Green Pass, mask, and all of that. And remember that even though the direction is good now, we cannot, lift all things like we did in April and May a few months ago.
I mean, as you mentioned, right, we do have all of these things, more holidays coming up, all these events that are taking place, like the Fanjoya you mentioned, in which thousands or hundreds and thousands of people are coming out, for these massive events. I mean, there aren't so many restrictions in place at the moment. So what does need to be done? I mean, what kind of restrictions should we be seeing?
I think that we need to be much more careful when we have events that are in closed places. I think that at schools, we need to be much more creative and see how we can maybe reduce the number of children in class and see how we are teaching outside. So we know now that basic facts that need to be enforced, the question of hygiene, masks, the difference between closed events and open events. So with closed events, we need to be stricter, but on the other hand, going to the swimming pool outside or parks, I think this should be allowed, not even necessarily with the green pass. So learning how to live with the virus is very important, and we need also to help municipalities that are lagging behind, either because of vaccination rates or because of other factors, including socioeconomic factors. And things cannot be just copy-paste altogether. There need to be a strong dialogue between the municipalities, the civic society, religious leaders, social leaders, and see how to adapt to every place according to the demography and the certain characteristics of the local area.
All right, Professor Nadav Davidovich, thank you so much for speaking with us today, and we'll hope for some more cautious optimism.
Thank you. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Finally, before we go, it's time to learn some Hebrew with the latest of our limited weekly lessons from our friends at Ulpano.
שלום, אני רוצה קפה, בבקשה. את רוצה קפוצ'ינו, אספרסו, קפה טורקי, קפוצ'ינו, אספרסו, קפה טורקי. אני רוצה אמריקנו. בבקשה. אוקיי, עם חלב? עם חלב? לא, תודה. אבל עם הרבה סוכר. בבקשה.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast with Hannah Rifkin.
And good to be back after a long Holy Day weekend. Now from one to the next, meteorologists predicting surprise scattered showers in the Beersheba area on Friday, while the rest of the country is expected to experience partly cloudy skies. Lows tonight ranging from 20 to 27 degrees Celsius, and highs tomorrow ranging from 28 to 37 degrees Celsius. Back to the studio with Lidar.
And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. All right, meet David Mariel, a man of gold who is all good. Every day, David spends money on drinks and food that he cooks at home and distributes to Golanchiks and soldiers in pillboxes and guard posts. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.21 shekels to the American dollar and 2.53 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, be well, and thank you so much for watching.